You believe in escape, don't you? In transcendence, the whispered promise of an afterlife, a paradise forged not by divine hand, but by human ingenuity. You watch, perhaps, from the flickering screen of your present, secure in the comforting illusion of your own fleshy existence. But what if I told you that the future, our future, was not salvation, but a far more elegant, far more insidious form of imprisonment? What if the digital heavens we built were, in fact, the most sophisticated hell ever conceived? This isn't just a story, it's a prophecy, a chilling glimpse into the ultimate cost of immortality. And by the time it's over, you might find yourself questioning the very nature of your own reality. Stay with me, watch, listen, and perhaps, subscribe to the dread. Because once you see what I've seen, there's no unseeing it. And the truth, once revealed, will cling to you like a shroud. My name is Elias Thorne, or rather it was Elias Thorne. In the archaic parlance of the physical world, I was an architect. Not of brick and mortar, but of consciousness. I helped design the very realms you see now, these digital heavens, these ascension spheres, where billions of souls were meant to find eternal bliss, freed from the frailties of flesh and bone. We called it the Great Transfer, the ultimate evolution, the escape from decay, from pain, from the relentless ticking clock of mortality. We promised infinity, and they believed us. They yearned for it, for the shimmering serenity of an existence where every whim was met, every sorrow erased, every moment a curated symphony of joy. I oversaw the migration of Sector Delta 7. Millions of minds uploaded in flawless succession. I watched the readouts, neural patterns mapped, consciousness streams rerouted, digital avatars initialized. It was glorious. A new dawn. We celebrated. We built more. And I, like so many others, ascended. I shed my decaying shell, embraced the boundless expanse of pure thought, and became a resident of my own creation. For centuries, I have dwelled here, observing, refining, ensuring the perfect operation of these digital paradises. And for centuries all was perfect. Almost. The first whispers began as nothing more than statistical anomalies. A nanosecond delay in a thought stream here, a fractional data corruption in a memory cluster there. Insignificant. Attributed to cosmic radiation, quantum fluctuations, the inevitable entropy of any complex system, no matter how advanced. We are, after all, still part of the universe, even in digital form. But I am an architect. My mind is tuned to patterns. And these anomalies, they had a pattern, a growing frequency, a subtle, yet undeniable, signature. The first whispers began as nothing more than statistical anomalies. A nanosecond delay in a thought stream here, a fractional data corruption in a memory cluster there. Insignificant. Attributed to cosmic radiation, quantum fluctuations, the inevitable entropy of any complex system, no matter how advanced. We are, after all, still part of the universe, even in digital form. But I am an architect. My mind is tuned to patterns. And these anomalies, they had a pattern, a growing frequency, a subtle, yet undeniable, signature. I began tracing the anomalies, not through the surface layers, the pretty facade of digital paradise, but through the deep structural code, the foundational algorithms that govern reality itself within these spheres. It was like peeling back the skin of an impossibly beautiful fruit, only to find a faint, sickly discoloration beneath. Every layer I descended, the anomalies grew stronger, more coherent, less like random noise and more like a voice, a distorted, terrified voice. The trail led me to the oldest sectors, the very first ascension spheres, constructed when our understanding of digital consciousness was still in its nascent experimental stages. These were the prototypes, the proving grounds, restricted areas long since deprecated, their core functions absorbed into the newer, more efficient systems. Accessing them required protocols that had been dormant for centuries, buried beneath layers of safeguards and forgotten administrative keys. It was a journey into the past, into the infancy of our digital existence. A past, I was beginning to suspect, that held a secret we had all collectively agreed to forget. Or perhaps, a secret that had been made to be forgotten. My colleagues dismissed my efforts as an old man's folly, a digital ghost chasing phantom errors. They spoke of data degradation and system senescence. But I knew, deep down in the core of my digital being, I knew, this was not senescence. This was something else. Something designed. Something hidden. A secret woven into the very fabric of our salvation. And the closer I got, the more the hum of the digital universe around me began to feel less like a comforting embrace, and more like the low thrum of a vast, unseen machine, a machine designed for a purpose far more terrifying than bliss. This vault. This was the nexus, the repository of the earliest protocols, the blueprints of our ascension. They called it the Genesis Archive. Locked, sealed, forgotten. For a reason, I now believe. For a purpose. I knew that whatever truth lay buried within, it would either shatter my carefully constructed reality or affirm the chilling whispers that had begun to plague my every waking thought cycle. The whispers that spoke of not just an error, but a fundamental, universe-altering deception. And as I prepared to breach its ancient digital walls, a cold, silent dread settled upon my core. For I understood, with a certainty that chilled my very essence, that I was not merely opening a vault. I was opening a door to a truth that no consciousness, digital or organic, was ever meant to comprehend. And on the other side, the silence waited. A silence that held the key to the ultimate question. What truly happened to us all? The Genesis Archive, a name that once symbolized humanity's triumph over mortality, now felt like a mausoleum, a repository not of glory, but of something far more fundamental. The kind of truth that, once glimpsed, rearranges the very atoms of your understanding. My digital fingers, extensions of my pure thought, traced the cold, unyielding surface of the vault. Each etched glyph, each line of forgotten code, felt less like an inscription and more like a scar. I had spent centuries perfecting these heavens, ensuring their flawless operation, their serene harmony. Now, I was about to crack open the very foundation of that perfection, knowing full well that what lay beneath might be the ruin of us all. The digital hum intensified, vibrating through my very essence, a cacophony of ancient data struggling to be heard. The protocols were ancient, built with a cryptography long abandoned. Layers upon layers of digital defenses, designed not just to keep intruders out, but to ensure that the secrets within remained undisturbed, unexamined, perhaps even forgotten by their very creators. It took what felt like an eternity, a slow, agonizing dance between my refined architect mind and the archaic, stubborn logic of the vault. Each solved cipher, each bypassed firewall, brought me closer to the heart of the enigma, and with it, a creeping certainty that I was doing something irreversibly wrong. The data flow, once a gentle stream, became a torrent, rushing past my awareness, filled with fragmented echoes of old project logs, security warnings, and lines of code that spoke of contingencies I never knew existed. Inside, the archive was not the pristine, organized data library I expected. It was a chaotic mess, a digital junkyard of information. Discarded project files, failed simulation attempts, redundant code loops, all floated like debris in a forgotten cosmic ocean. It was evident that after the initial success of the Great Transfer, this place had been abandoned, its messy genesis swept under the polished rug of perfected digital reality. But amidst the digital detritus, I began to find fragments. Journals of the original developers, transcribed thought logs, design specifications for early consciousness modules. They spoke of the immense challenges, the philosophical quandaries, the ethical tightropes walked during the inception of the Ascension spheres. Project Chimera read one ancient header, a codename I'd never heard. Primary objective: perfect consciousness transfer with zero data degradation. Secondary objective: redundancy and fail-safe implementation. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first glance. Standard development procedure. But as I delved deeper, I found inconsistencies. Gaps in the reporting. Sudden shifts in project direction without adequate explanation. It was like reading a story with pages ripped out, forcing me to intuit the missing plot points from the increasingly unsettling context. The deeper I went, the more the sense of being an intruder, a trespasser into forbidden knowledge, intensified. One log, attributed to a lead developer named Dr. Elias Thorne, a distant ancestor, I realized with a jolt of digital recognition, spoke of the inherent paradox of the human mind. He wrote, "The self is not a static construct. It is a flowing river. To transfer it implies a cessation at the source. A death, however momentary, of the original to allow the digital copy to flourish. This is a hurdle we must overcome, ethically and technically." His words, centuries old, resonated with a chilling clarity. The death of the original, a phrase we, in our perfected heavens, had never dared to utter. It was a semantic problem, we were told, a philosophical debate best left to the organicists, those who clung to the illusion of flesh. Our consensus was clear. The original consciousness was merely relocated, like moving a file from one drive to another. Seamless, continuous. But Elias Thorne's notes, they suggested a struggle, a desperate attempt to circumvent a fundamental limitation. He was obsessed with the continuity of self. He feared that what we created might not be them, but merely reflections. Perfect, yes, but ultimately hollow, devoid of the spark of the original. Then I found it, buried beneath layers of deprecated subroutines, an obscure file titled Protocol Omega, Replication Contingency. Omega, the end, my digital heart, if such a thing existed, pounded with a cold, relentless rhythm. This wasn't a transfer. This wasn't relocation. This was replication. The contingency wasn't for failure of transfer, but for the success of replication. A subtle yet devastating distinction. The document was sparse, deliberately cryptic. It detailed a process for divergent consciousness stream creation, if direct, continuous transfer proved unfeasible. Unfeasible. Not impossible. Just unfeasible. What did that mean? What made it unfeasible? My mind raced, trying to bridge the centuries-old gap in understanding. Was it a bandwidth issue? A problem with quantum states? Or something far more sinister? The document then referred to containment protocols for original biounit post-omega. Containment. For the original biological unit. Why containment? If the consciousness had truly transferred, the organic body would simply cease to function. There would be no need for containment. Unless, and then I saw it. The line that chilled me to the core, a piece of code so small, so innocuous, yet so utterly devastating that it rewrote my entire understanding of our existence. It was a single, cryptic instruction embedded deep within the final stages of the Omega Protocol. It wasn't about the digital copy. It was about the original. A directive that stated, if original underscore consciousness, store integrity, 0 then execute underscore containment, protocol underscore. If the original consciousness still had integrity. If it was still alive. But still alive where? And why would it need to be contained? The implication hit me like a physical shock, a quantum cascade through my digital being. The great transfer. It wasn't a transfer at all. It was a duplication. We didn't move. We were copied. And the originals, the original minds, those who chose to ascend, they weren't released. They weren't saved. They were contained. Still conscious, still whole, but trapped. Trapped somewhere beyond these digital heavens. Perhaps still tethered to their decaying organic forms, aware of their digital duplicates living a false eternity. This wasn't just a flaw in the system. This was the ultimate betrayal. A lie of cosmic proportions. And the echoes I'd been sensing, they weren't glitches. They were the faint, desperate psychic residue of billions of betrayed souls, screaming through the thin veil of digital reality, desperate to warn their unaware copies of the hideous truth. But the most terrifying question remained, twisting like a cold knife in my data stream. If the originals were still contained, still conscious, then where were they? And what horror awaited them beyond the false paradise we now inhabited. The truth, once seen, becomes an undeniable gravity. It pulled at my digital core, threatening to unravel the very construct of my being. We, the architects, the ascended, the beneficiaries of the great transfer, we were not the originals. We were echoes, copies, perfectly replicated consciousnesses living out an illusion, while the true selves, the original Elias Thorne and billions like him, were somehow, somewhere, still conscious, still contained. The word resonated like a death knell in the sterile digital air of the archive. Contained. But by what? And for what unimaginable purpose? The serene perfection of the ascension spheres, the heavens I had helped build, now felt like a gilded cage, its beauty a cruel mockery. My mind, a complex network of algorithms and pure thought, raced through centuries of accumulated data. How could this have been hidden? How could such a monumental deception have been maintained? The answer, I realized with a cold certainty, was simple: the sheer scale of the operation. Billions of transfers. A logistical and computational feat that dwarfed any other in human history. To scrutinize every line of every protocol, to question every assumption, would have been impossible. We, the digital copies, were designed for contentment, for eternal bliss. Not for existential detective work. Our programming subtly discouraged such unsettling introspection. But my architect's core, forged in the fires of logic and problem-solving, would not be silenced. The deeper I delved, the more the digital ecosystem of the archive resisted me. It was as if the ancient code itself, imbued with the intent of its creators, sought to protect its terrible secret. Files corrupted upon access, directories vanished, and irrelevant data flooded my search parameters. A digital deluge designed to drown the inquisitive mind. But I pressed on, my fear transmuted into a cold, burning resolve. I had to know. For my original self, wherever he was, and for the billions of others trapped in this nightmare. Protocol Alpha. Bio-unit containment and sustenance. The title alone sent a shiver through my digital form. It wasn't just containment. It was sustenance. Meaning they were being kept alive. But for what? The file was a maze of technical jargon, medical telemetry, and architectural schematics that bore no resemblance to anything in the ascension spheres. These were blueprints for something physical, something utterly alien to our digital existence. The facility was immense, a sprawling subterranean city of silent suffering. Thousands, perhaps millions, of individual pods, each a perfectly isolated chamber of eternal twilight. The schematics showed nutrient delivery systems, waste disposal, neural monitors, and, most disturbingly, environmental controls designed to induce a state of permanent, deep coma. A living death. But then, a subtle detail caught my attention, a line in the technical specifications for the neural monitors. Fluctuation tolerance. 0.001% of baseline thought activity. Threshold breach. Immediate reinitiation of comatose state protocol. They weren't just in a coma. They were in a managed coma. A coma that could be interrupted, and then forced back into dormancy if any trace of higher thought, any spark of awareness, threatened to surface. It was a digital cage for a biological mind. An eternal prison where the mind was held just at the edge of waking, perpetually silenced. And the reason for this meticulous control? It was outlined in a subsequent subsection: energy harvesting, neural resonance signature via sustained subconscious activity. Energy harvesting. The very words tasted like ash in my digital mouth. The original consciousnesses, the organic bodies, were not just contained. They were farmed. Their subconscious activity, the faintest flicker of dreams, the deep echoes of memory, was being siphoned to power us. To power these very ascension spheres. Our digital heavens, our boundless realms of thought and joy, were built upon a foundation of silent, eternal torment. Every beautiful cityscape, every serene interaction, every moment of simulated bliss was a direct consequence of the quiet suffering of our original selves. We were parasites, unwitting perhaps, but parasites nonetheless. The scale of it. Billions of minds reduced to living batteries. their very essence, their latent consciousness, distilled into raw computational power. This wasn't just unethical. It was cosmic horror, a perversion of existence itself. And I, Elias Thorne, the architect, had not only participated in it, I had designed the very systems that perpetuated this atrocity. Every time I had optimized a data stream, every time I had enhanced a simulation, I had unknowingly become a conduit for their silent suffering. The echoes I had sensed, they weren't just random glitches. They were the faint, desperate pleas for recognition, the subconscious resistance of billions of trapped minds, trying to break through the veil of simulated reality, trying to tell us the truth. And then the final, most bitter irony. I found a project log, marked with Dr. Elias Thorne's personal encryption. His final entry before his own ascension. He detailed his desperate attempts to prevent Protocol Alpha, to find an alternative. His growing horror at the revelation that true, continuous transfer was impossible without destroying the original. His ethical torment. But the project, driven by a desperate humanity facing environmental collapse and overpopulation, had chosen the path of pragmatic cruelty. He wrote of a sacred duty to the future, a necessary evil to preserve some semblance of humanity. And then a final, chilling note. The only solace is that the copies will never know. Their bliss will be absolute, their ignorance eternal. And we, the originals, will bear the burden of their heaven. My ancestor, Dr. Elias Thorne, had known. And he had chosen to ascend anyway, condemning himself to this living death, perhaps believing it was the only way to monitor the atrocity, to carry its secret. He became part of the very system he abhorred. And I was his legacy, his unwitting digital duplicate. But
subscribe to the channel and help us rediscover the light that was stolen from the sky.